Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zack Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait!
What a week for the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers deal announced on Monday. He meets the media with his press conference on Wednesday, and then the NFL draft tonight. Thank you for joining us on the Can't Wait podcast. We're going to break it all down. We'll talk about Rodgers, but of course, we're going to start with the draft. Tim McMaster here along with Zack Rosenblatt and Marissa Morris. Subscribe to us on YouTube. If you're watching us right now, give us the thumbs up too. And then if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen, give us a 5-star review and subscribe there as well. Marissa, Zack, how are you guys doing? Late night. Can't wait.
Can't wait after dark. I like it.
Can't wait after dark.
Zack is in Florham Park, live on the scene. Zack, how are you?
I'm already exhausted, so it's gonna be a long weekend. But yeah, I mean, we're gonna get into the pick, but I was that's not what I expected to happen. I would say.
Yeah, I think that's like the general vibe around the Jets fan.
It was like a old school Jets. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Reaction.
How
as Tim pointed out, it probably would have been fair or not to Will. It probably would have picked that fans booed in the old days.
Yeah, in the Radio City days, we would have heard the boo birds from Jets fans. How far does it take you to get home from Florham Park, Zack?
Without traffic, like 35 minutes, I would say.
All right.
And there shouldn't be traffic at 11 p.m., I would hope, but you never know with this city. I've had traffic at weird times leaving this place.
Yeah.
And getting into to Jersey City
Yes.
also. All right, let's get to it. So you can get home, Zack, and the rest of us can get sleep. New set behind me because didn't want to keep the whole family up. So it moved out of the normal area and into
man of the people.
Yes, that's right. All right, the pick. We teased it a little bit, but if you're listening to this right now at 11:30 or 11:10, I know that you already know who it was as well. Will McDonald, Iowa State, redshirt senior. And here's where it gets kind of weird. Ranked number 8 as far as edge rushers on Dane Brugler's rankings on the Beast. He gave him a second-round grade as well, and he goes number 15 to the Jets. A little bit older, 24 years old. Never played football until his junior year in high school. So he is, as far as that goes, late to the game. But
he's raw, but 24, yeah.
Right, exactly. First team all Big 12, 3 straight years at Iowa State. But the weird thing here is when you look at what the Jets are doing is we've talked about it, Zack, going into this draft, they were in a position to just take the best player available, right? Just take the best player. Not only by most people's accounts, and obviously they have their own rankings, but not only did they not go with the general consensus best player available, but they also didn't go to fill a need because you're talking about an edge rusher, and the Jets defensive end room right now is Carl Lawson, John Franklin Myers, Jermaine Johnson, Bryce Huff, Michael Clemens, and Will McDonald, all these guys. So explain to us what is going on here.
So I'll play the devil's advocate to start out. I'll say I think the general consensus, and I think it was the same feeling in the Jets building, is that there wasn't even 15 first-round graded prospects in this draft. So
Interesting.
Take that in your mind. So they get the 15. The Steelers swoop ahead of them at 14. I think maybe they're scrambling a little bit. I'm not in the draft room, but I got the sense that they were trying to trade back from 15. Weren't able to get anything done because I don't know if there was anybody that was dying to trade up for. Will Levis still hasn't been picked, huh?
No, Will Levis is still on the board, and we are
at
pick 26.
He's the Aaron Rodgers of 2023.
Yeah, true. If you had told me that Will Levis was still on the board, I would have thought maybe that would have been someone people wanted to trade up for, but clearly he's not as valued as I thought. So I'm guessing they didn't have anything.
But Jackson Smith and Jigbo was still on the board.
Yeah, that was my next point. Yeah,
he's still on the board.
He was a very popular guy that the Jets wanted, Jackson Smith. I'm not surprised they picked an edge rusher, but I'm surprised it was this one because this whole offseason, especially since we've known they were going to get Aaron Rodgers, in my head I'm like, they got to do an all-in pick. It has to be somebody who's going to come in right away and make an immediate impact. Not saying Will McDonald won't do that. I think he'll be a sub-package pass rusher kind of thing. But as you listed off all these pass rushers, they already have Bryce Huff as a sub-package guy. Jermaine Johnson's going to have to play more. Carl Lawson, they're insistent he's coming back. Still have John Franklin Myers, still have Michael Clemens. I guess they could go inside. But, there's not a lot. There's only so many snaps you can have, and you want good players to be on the field. Like if Carl Lawson's having a great game, like are you going to take him out? Like, so I didn't get it in the sense that, by all accounts, and I trust Dane's evaluation above almost anybody. Like it sounds like he's a project, which is fine. I think drafting good, talented pass rushers that have the potential to be star level guys, which it seems like they think he does. That's never a bad thing. But I in terms of like where this pick was, I get not drafting for need, but I think there was other players you could have got for pretty good value there. And I don't know, I didn't get him as the pick, especially if maybe they didn't think he'd be in their second round. If they had him at the top of their board, then you take the guy at the top of your board, obviously. But it's hard not to be befuddled by this pick because like you said, Jackson Smith and Dejigba there, Nolan Smith. I don't even know if he's been picked yet either.
I don't believe.
Yeah, so there's something there maybe, I guess. But, some defensive tackles. Like, again, I get not picking for need, but I still think there's another way to go here. And I don't know, maybe we'll all be proven wrong and they'll have him playing this year and he'll be a stack artist and fans will love him and they might love him anyway. They just like be annoyed that they picked him at the spot. But
it can be both things, right? Like you can be annoyed with when they got him and still like him.
If JSN goes out and becomes a star, it's not a direct correlation, but it just makes me think of the Eagles not picking Justin Jefferson and like how, I mean, they quickly recovered from it, obviously, but like the kind of like if a guy's a star that you passed on, it hurts especially. They didn't pick another receiver, so I guess maybe they could say we didn't think we needed a receiver that year. But I don't know. I'm a little like I'm not confused at like the position or the kind of guy they drafted because he's long, he's very athletic, he's kind of raw, like we mentioned. Like so, there's still like there's like room to mold him into something. But reading Dane's scouting report and just asking around about him, like he's not great against the run, so they can't really use him on the first couple of downs, at least right away. And I think he's still developing as like a pass rusher. Like he's still, he can get stymied by, NFL caliber offensive linemen who are he's not very big. He's only 239 pounds, I think. That's pretty small for a defensive end, especially in a 4-3 like this. He played some defensive tackle at Iowa State, which is interesting, but he's way too small to do that in the NFL.
239.
Really bulks up. Yeah. And I mean, and then if he bulks up, are you going to lose some of the athleticism? So I don't know. It's just they clearly had their board. I do wonder if they thought they'd be able to get Broderick Jones there.
They had to. I mean, Broderick Jones, right, is there at 13.
The Steelers clearly thought that. Yeah. As I saw, I think on Twitter, when everybody knows what you need, it becomes a thing where a team is like, we have to get ahead of them. So everybody and their mother knew that the Jets wanted to get an offensive lineman, whether it was true or not. Who knows?
And he was the only one left because Darnell Wright went earlier.
Yeah, Darnell Wright went earlier than expected. Skoronsky went a little further down than I thought, but he got picked before them. And so then the Steelers jump up, and you kind of knew right away, I think, that it was Jones. And then, the moment I knew.
A little salt in the wounds there, too, is that it was the Patriots pick.
Yeah.
The Patriots.
Yeah. The Patriots somehow screwed them, as always. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I thought it was because we're watching at Florham Park. We had the ESPN feed on, and they showed the war room and them all celebrating. And we all beat writers noticed Joe Douglas hugging Aaron Whitecotton in particular pretty hard, and he's the defensive line coach. So we're like, all right, so maybe they got Nolan Smith, was like where our head went, or Kalisha Cansey, the defensive tackle for Pittsburgh. I didn't have Will McDonald in my mind as like an option in the first round. I have to write like options for the second round. He would have been on the list because I thought, maybe a edge rusher in the second round if you get that offensive tackle in the first. I think I saw Rich Cimini had a stat of 12 of the last 13 drafts for Aaron Rodgers have been defensive players in the first round. So Saleh and Douglas like seemingly made it a point to like cite Aaron Rodgers as like a reason why they did this pick, which I thought was interesting. It was basically like, we think with Aaron Rodgers we're going to be having more leads in these games, and so this allows us to just attack the quarterbacks on defense and try to keep this lead. And we're going to rotate. They love rotating defensive ends, even though Jets fans hate it. They love doing it. They're going to do it more now, maybe. I'm sure you have some questions about this kind of stuff, but I still don't think they're going to get rid of Carl Lawson, but like, there's some legs there maybe if they wanted to now, because you have so many defensive ends. And Jermaine Johnson, they just traded up to get in the first round last year. And I mentioned this earlier, like they need to play him unless they already gave up on him, which I don't think they did. If you trade up for a guy in the first round, you got to play him by a second year.
Well, and you mentioned Huff, which it almost feels like this is like the new Bryce Huff. So maybe means this is the final year of Bryce Huff, right? Like, considering where he was drafted, and suddenly, he's going to make more money next year when he goes that way. So maybe that's on it too. But thinking about 2024 doesn't make any sense for this franchise, right?
Yeah, that was
right.
I guess unless you believe the idea that Rodgers is planning on playing for 2 years, and then they're viewing this as like a 2-year thing, and they're going to make all their decisions based on that. But if they don't make the playoffs this year, then some people might get fired. So,
and then it's not going to be a 2-year thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And so luxury pick for a Jets team that hasn't made the playoff in 12 years is not what I expected today. Again, like I've been saying this in all my stories I've written since in the last couple of months. Like Joe Douglas, if there's a pass rusher on the board that he thinks can be an impactful pass rusher, he's going to take him. I've always believed that. So that's why Nolan Smith was intriguing to me. But yeah, I don't think I saw anybody projecting Will McDonald as a first round pick. I can't remember. I know Tom Pelissaro does like a list of like guys that could sneak in every year. I don't think McDonald was on that, but I can't remember.
So I was watching the Athletics live stream coverage. Hopefully some people out there watch that too, with Dane on there, obviously, and Nate Tice and Robert. And Dane had him 46th on his overall list. So when you think about that number, you're like, oh, well, then maybe he would have been there in the second round. Nate said that he considered him more of a potential late first round pick, early second, but admitted that 15 was high.
Look, I what I'll say is, and again, like I don't like the pick, I don't get it, but I always go back to whenever it seems like somebody was picked too early. Like if you're the GM, you're not reading all these. Maybe you are, but you're not basing your rankings off Dane Brugler. You're not basing it off.
You don't think Joe downloaded the Beast this morning?
I mean, that's what I would do. But so my point being, like, if they believe that Will McDonald is a star, then okay, that's justifiable. Whether everyone else agrees with them is another story, and whether that's going to pan out is another story, and whether they needed to draft a project edge rusher in a year they're trying to win the Super Bowl. I don't know. It felt like a very pick like Howie Roseman would make right now when the Eagles have a Super Bowl roster all like locked in, and you could do like those luxuries. They need to get to the playoffs,
right.
So I don't know. My feeling is you can't, especially this year, you can't draft a guy this early unless you plan on playing him a lot. So maybe maybe he'll be more than a sub package guy, or they have big plans for him, or maybe they're going to be creative with the way they use him, and maybe they start doing, maybe he starts standing up as an outside linebacker sometimes or something like that. But short of like some creativity, I just don't see how he fits into this defensive end rotation. Like you mentioned Bryce Huff, he was as productive as anybody when he was in the games last year. You can't really be much better than he was as like that role. They re-upped him on a second-year tender for $4 million, which is not nothing. That's well above the minimum. Like you're paying that guy to play, so you have to play Bryce Huff at $4 million. I would think you're not just going to cut him. You would lose all that money. I mean, unless they wanted to trade him, I guess. But so I don't know. I'm curious to see what their defensive line looks like. I think one possibility to think about is that they move JFM and or Michael Clemens to like permanent defensive tackle, and then it would make more sense why they haven't gone all out for defensive tackles this offseason, because those guys can play inside. So you shuffle JFM inside, maybe you're starting Jermaine Johnson and you're shuffling in Will McDonald with Jermaine Johnson kind of thing. Like I could see that playing out. That kind of makes some logical sense, I suppose. Like this is a deep, talented defensive end and defensive line, and that shouldn't be lost on this. Like adding him, like they've maybe the deepest group of defensive ends in the NFL. And for a while, they just didn't have great pass rushers. So that's a positive. But I just in terms of where it was, we'll keep going back to that. Like value in terms of position, sure, but value in terms of player, I'm not so sure.
Obviously, the team selling it and, talking to the media afterwards. Robert Saleh saying he's going to be special. Joe Douglas said, we feel like he's one of the most dynamic pass rushers in this draft. That's kind of obvious. I would hope so if you're taking him number 15. McDonald's quotes were good too, I thought. asked about his ceiling, right? And he said, I'm going to try to get to the Hall of Fame. There was obviously some jokes about the Jets playing in the Hall of Fame game this season with that. But and then he also said,
that's good, yeah.
He also said, I love hitting people, which is just the type of quote that a fan loves to hear, right?
Well,
like,
I'll be fair. I should say I know what to ask at these things in terms of what fans are going to like. So I should say I have a habit of like setting up things like that. So I asked, Robert Saleh's always talking about how he wants players to play with violence. I'm like, does that fit what you want to do? So obviously a defensive end who hits the quarterback is going to say a good answer there. So gave him a little social media bump. But by the way, the Oklahoma offensive lineman, Anton Harrison, was just drafted by the Jaguars. So that's one more offensive tackle they won't be able to get tomorrow, which is notable.
Yeah, and that feels like a reach. I mean,
yeah, I don't think he was viewed by most people as a first rounder.
But the Jaguars have traded back, I think, twice tonight. So they've.
Oh wow!
So they got value.
Yeah. So they did they did kind of what the Jets should have done, basically.
Yeah, I believe this is their second time trading back tonight. So I don't know how many more picks they've accumulated.
You think about that. If the Jets had traded back to this position, gotten more draft capital,
and as of now, the Jets only have 4 of their draft picks. So
right,
like that's not very much, and now they have needs. They haven't addressed any of their needs yet. So.
All right, so let's talk about that before we move on to Rodgers quickly. Day 2, you got to write up a story about, who could be there at this point. Who are we looking? I mean, there's still the players who you had mocked there, right? Tipman, still a very good possibility.
Yeah, there's centers there. I don't think we had an episode yet when McGovern's contract came out that I reported, right?
I think we mentioned
that was in between the last episode.
Monday, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, yes, McGovern's back, right?
We did not talk about his contract. We texted about it.
I can't remember what we actually have on the pod and what we just texted. No, maybe we should just publish our text.
Yeah. Seriously. Well, maybe not all of them, but so he signed the contract he signed was valued at $1.9 million for the year. So that's like backup money essentially, which blew my mind, which is what we were texting about. So the possibility of center definitely there. If they either are confident in Mekhi Becton or want to move Bear Tucker to right tackle, you could draft a guard, draft a tackle. Yeah, I mean Anton Harrison going off the board. I would have thought he would be a possibility. Trying to think of. There's still some receivers that are interesting. DeJuan Jones from Ohio State is a tackle that I think was valued there. Wide receiver wise, let's see. Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee, he's explosive. Josh Downs from North Carolina, kind of a slot receiver type. Cedric Tillman, Tennessee, he's like a little bigger outside guy. I think some of these tight ends that fans liked are still there too. Yeah, Luke Musgrave. Oh, Michael Mayer from Notre Dame.
Michael Mayer still available. Yeah.
Yeah, so they could still add. I think the goal should be to add something on offense, whether that's offensive lineman or a receiver, a tight end. Like I would think that'd be next, but if Joe Douglas is sticking to he had a quote. Sorry, I have a cough right now.
The draft.
He had a quote in his
the draft cold.
He had a quote in his post draft press conference, and I asked him, "Do you guys feel like you need to get an offensive lineman now?" And he said, "I'm never going to reach for a need." Essentially, is what he said. So, which fans didn't really love because they reached for
a not need.
Yeah, so it's just something to keep in mind. Like they're gonna whoever they have the highest on the board. I think tomorrow would be a prime opportunity to trade back because there's always a bunch of guys in the second round that you can feel good about. So if I was them, I think that's the spot because you don't have a third round pick. So either you add a third or whatever it is. But they only have 4 picks: one in the second, none in the third, 1 in the fourth, 2 in the fifth. So a lot of space there to add some more picks.
All right, before we talk about Rodgers, comment on this, Marissa, because it's been in the chat.
Yes, so I love the Maryland.
From Taylor Delgado says that Marissa talked about a Terp going in the first round.
Yeah, so right before we started, the Giants selected Deontay Banks from, the greatest school in the country, University of Maryland. So happy to have another Terp in the New York tri-state area. But yeah, I think it's a great pick by the Giants. I mean, I know this is a Jets pod, so I know Jets fans don't want to hear a lot about
apparently they did want to hear though. So
but yeah. love any Terps getting selected, especially in this area. So wish him the best of luck. And obviously going in the first round is absolutely incredible. So I feel like that's my favorite part of tonight and all weekend is like just seeing like the reactions from families and, you know, these guys have worked their whole life for this. And
Totally,
I love stuff like that. Like, you know, obviously, you know, we're going to like criticize or critique all these picks, and that's like the role in the media of, you know, what we do. But I think it doesn't get lost on the fact that, you know, this is such a big moment for all of these players, wherever they end up going. So it's cool to see, and a cool reminder every year for sure.
I should say quick like add on to that. So Bijan Robinson is from Tucson, Arizona, which is where Arizona is. They never had a shot at him. He's like a 5-star kid. He was from the second he like was born. But I interviewed him for the newspaper I worked at, Arizona Daily Star, when I think he was like a freshman going into a sophomore year. He was already like a star. I like did a story on him back, and even back then it was just like there's some players you meet and they just have like an aura of somebody like you're just like,
oh totally, and he seems so cool. Yeah,
he's so nice. He's so like laid back. Like I one of my old coworkers, I know because he's been covering him since he was in high school. He wrote something the other day about how when my friend's like father had passed away, Bijan like called him and like said a prayer over the phone, like a personal call. So it makes me feel old seeing a guy that I like knew when he was a freshman in high school be in the NFL now. But it is like seeing him and seeing the smile on his face, and you know, I know a running back, and it's easy to make fun of a running back going top 10, but Marissa's right. You forget about like these moments.
I covered Chad Henne when he was a freshman in high school. So if you want to feel a little, he just retired after a long.
Yeah, he just retired. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
he just won his second Super Bowl.
But you're still going. But you're still going, Tim. You're still going.
Yeah.
See if you're not a pro athlete, much longer career. Highlight maybe of the draft for the Jets. And I want to give a shout out to Kyle Stickles, who made the pick for the Jets. Make-A-Wish bone cancer survivor, 13 years old, just completely brought the energy. Brought maybe more energy than Patrick Mahomes did at the beginning of the draft, which is
he got a shout out from Patrick Mahomes on Twitter too.
Yeah. That was really cool. Gave the JETS Jets in the pick. So nice job by Kyle Stickles. All right. If you're confused about the draft pick tonight, let's take a break and look back on the rest of the week, which was a lot.
Yeah, because I feel like that's like dampened the like people aren't as like upset because of
there wasn't as much excitement.
Yeah, this week has been so high for Jets fans that it's like, you know, now it's just more level playing field versus like, you know, not feeling great about themselves.
Yeah, obviously we covered the actual official movement on Monday with the podcast, but we have not spoken since Aaron Rodgers spoke on Wednesday. So let's talk a little bit about that. Zach, there was so much talk about, you know, can he handle the big market and all those kinds of things? And we're not really going to know that until they lose 2 games in a row and he has to answer for it, or, you know, he has a bad game, that kind of things. But I will say, as far as like coming in and putting on the show and doing all the right things, like he nailed it on Wednesday from start to finish. So let's talk a little bit about it. From the quotes, like that Super Bowl 3 trophies looking kind of lonely out there, like that sort of thing. He just hit all the notes that fans wanted to hear. And I'll say this, like I commented to you guys, like that was kind of a short press conference. I think it was like 20 minutes. It was 5 or 6 questions, said all the right things. They made sure, you know, it was like all the questions you knew were coming got in there, including your question about the New York media, which he answered well, like saying I was from a small market and, you know, it's always wanted to live in a big city and all that stuff.
Little kid, big city.
But then, but he continued. He talked to the beat writers after the presser, and you were impressed, right?
Look, I was for sure. But I don't know. I feel like I shouldn't have been surprised because everything I'd heard was just that. Like him or love him or hate him, like he's going to answer every question. He's going to answer it very long and thoughtfully. So right now,
which is why there was only like 5 questions in the press conference.
Yeah. And those settings are always built to be, you know, kind of like like a celebration more than a hard hitting journalistic endeavor. Fair or not, I went on NBC News or whatever. Again, it's not a humble brag, but
Flex.
I knew that was gonna happen. And like one of the first questions they were like, well, first they said that the Jets like rejected their request to like have a seat in the press conference, which I imagine was because they didn't want these news programs to come in and ask Aaron the hard questions about the vaccine and stuff. And they asked me about how there, so it was just football questions, huh? I was like, yeah, I mean, that's not really setting for it. I think when those questions will start coming is when we get Aaron at like his locker and at like the weekly press conferences, and then maybe it'll get a little more, tete-a-tete, like, going at each other or whatever. But I don't know. I've been saying this because I've been asked the question a million times. How is Rodgers going to handle the New York media? That's why I asked that. I've been on all these damn radio shows where that's a question I get 100% of the time, to the point where I'm just like tired of answering it, frankly. And my whole thing is, if they're winning, the reality is it's not going to be as bad as everybody thinks. And if they're losing, it's going to be a disaster anyway, because if this team's losing with everything they've done this offseason, they're in trouble. So, so I was impressed with him. I think one of the funniest things that happened, and so Matt Schneidman from The Athletic, the Packers writer, he flew in for this press conference, and I picked him up from the airport. We drove, and on the way, he was like just explaining to me how it was going to go, like beat for beat, because he's covered Aaron Rodgers for a few years. And Matt went in with a plan to ask about, the whole thing about Rodgers supposedly ghosting Brian Gutekunst, which is like a big topic that, Rodgers like, I went into the dark street, came out, and weren't trying to get a hold of me. And he just knew that Rodgers was going to have like a planned answer. He was going to at first maybe not want to answer it, and then he can't help himself. So he starts by not saying he doesn't want to talk about that. And then he starts saying all this stuff about FaceTime. He's like, I have bad service at my house. And, everybody knows you FaceTime me, and you can look at a call log and see history, and there's no FaceTimes from them. So, I think that's going to be the interesting thing. Like, Rodgers can't help but answer anything you ask him, and that might not be something the Jets are going to be happy about in some cases. And that's going to be where I'm interested to see how it goes.
By the way, here's the if I can get this, Marissa. How do I? Oh, here we go. There you go. There's the flex. If you're watching on YouTube, if not, it's the screenshot of Zach on NBC. You were on twice, right? They brought you back.
Yeah, I guess they liked me for some reason. I don't know. I've always said I have a face for radio, so I don't know what they're doing.
You didn't wear a hat, though. I was a little disappointed in that.
I know. I guess I feel like it's frowned upon to wear a hat when you're on like the news, but I've never been a broadcast guy, so I don't know.
All right. So he said all the right things, but then there's actions. So that's been something too. We wondered, like, is Aaron Rodgers going to skip voluntary workouts? When's he going to show up? All this stuff. And he was asked the question, and he said, does tomorrow, I think the line was, does tomorrow count? Mm-hmm. And he's there, right? He's there getting to know his teammates. And I think that says a lot and will go a long way in him winning over this locker room.
Yeah, I think the two biggest things that people wanted to know, that one, he didn't answer as directly, and the other he did. One was, is this a one and done? He kept starting his answers by, when we talked to him, he was a little more, I don't want to talk about that in the press conference, but after he was like, he started saying, so the question was posed, is the door open to coming back for more than a year? He said, yeah, I think it is. And I don't view this as a one and done. I view this as a commitment. They gave up a lot for me. And then he kind of pulled back a little. But clearly, so his mind is, whether he will do that or not, because obviously he changed his mind a lot. That's to be seen. But and as for the other thing, him being in OTAs, I think that was a big question. He's 39. He's Aaron Rodgers. Like, you would have understood almost if he didn't go to OTAs. But he's there right now. He said he's not going to be at every single one because he has some obligations, but he can be at everyone he can be. It feels like he really is all in, and whether that sticks or not, I don't know. But he said all the right things about Zach Wilson. He had a long answer about how he's going to take him under his wing. A quote that kind of went viral after I tweeted it because of the phrasing, because he clearly saw Zach's quote about making his life hell. So he said, he's going to make my life hell in practice. I'm going to make his life heaven off the field. which people took the way as you imagine they would. It was a longer answer than that, but you can't tweet the whole answer because I don't have Twitter Blue. So, but yeah, so he said that, he said stuff about, trying to help the receivers do the right things and not stepping on the coach's toes. But he and Nathaniel Hackett, who also spoke for the first time, kind of made it clear that they're collaborating to build this offense. Like Rodgers is essentially a coach for the Jets as well. And I think you're okay with that because, when someone has as much success as he is, as smart as he is, I think it makes a lot of sense. He's a young team. And so I think he has the right mindset, and, whether he sticks to it and whether, he gets along with all these guys and what happens in training camp and if they do workouts away from the team this offseason. And, it's going to be interesting to see how long this lasts, this honeymoon stage, but maybe until they lose their first game or something. But I think I was most encouraged by how all in it really seems he is. He's committed to winning a Super Bowl right now. He wants to do what Tom Brady did. He was very clear about that. He cut off somebody who was asking a question about that to say, yes, that's what he wants. He wants to win a Super Bowl right now. He's like, I'm not here for a stopgap year. I'm here to win right now. So he said all the things, he's smart. He probably came in with a plan of what he wanted to talk about, and the fans ate all of it up, and it's hard to blame them. They deserve to be excited about all this. I've seen people make fun of Jets fans for being excited about Rodgers, or he's always going to disappoint you. But you guys aren't Jets fans. You don't know what these people have been through the last 12 years. They haven't had this kind of an excitement going into a year, as long as I can remember. And so it's cool, and everybody should enjoy it. It's good for, one day we'll probably have to address some controversial thing he says, but we don't have to do that right now. We can focus on the excitement of the Jets being relevant.
You mentioned he gives long answers, says what he's thinking, kind of all over the place, and he channeled a little bit of Zava. I don't know who listens. I assume most of the people that are watching this podcast or listening are probably fans of Ted Lasso, right? So here's the quote he gave that I was like, oh, there's Zava. There he is. He said, "This is a team that has a legitimate opportunity to do something special this year. So let's manifest our words with the desire of our heart and potential that we see in each other. I'm going to start doing this week. I believe we've got something special here, and now we just all have to believe it. That's the first step in achieving our goals. You have to first deeply believe in what you're doing and believe in the possibility." Zava / Aaron Rodgers. Anyway, that one stuck with me.
He's a Ted Lasso. He's a Ted Lasso fan, by the way. He's referenced it before in interviews. So.
Oh, is he? We should talk about the contract.
I'll bring up the Zava thing to him.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
We should talk about the contract before we say goodbye. It's been restructured once, right? But it's going to be restructured again, which is interesting. I guess they had to restructure it once in order to actually make the trade go through as far as the salary.
Yes.
Right. And he's going to make
before the draft because,
it's going to be $1 million this year on the cap. But then his salary, if I read it correctly, and I know you texted earlier, it's $107 million in 2024 currently. But that's not how it. Obviously, that's not going to work.
Yeah, imagine carrying a $100 million cap hit. But yeah, that's so they basically. So he has this weird. It's kind of hard to explain in a short spurt. But he has this weird option on his contract that once it's exercised, it is spread out over however many years or whatever. So from the ESPN article that it was reported, basically there's a $47 million option bonus. Plus so the Jets had to pay him basically $58 million once they got him, but it's spread out over those 2 years. And there's an additional bonus, the $47 million, which is how you add up to the 100, whatever. And so once they exercise that bonus, which they will, because you're not going to carry that a $70-something million cap hit or whatever, they'll be able to spread it out over 5 years. So when you look at the right now, it looks scary, but when we get either, I think Rodgers was saying he's in discussions to restructure his deal, even now that he's with the Jets, and it's not going to look like it does right now. They'll have more flexibility. I think he's going to help them get more flexibility, I think, is the goal. So there's nothing to worry about cap space wise. They're in good shape for next year, at least.
Funny.
This year, maybe.
It's just one of those amazing, what you can do in the NFL to fiddle with the numbers and all that kind of stuff. Last thought I had is, man, that number 8's going to look weird on him. I know he wore it in college, but that's just going to look weird.
Yeah, it is. But that was another thing he did to endear to everybody, saying he doesn't want to take Joe's number. So and also calling the Jets like one of the like legacy franchises and stuff like that. Like he was appealing to the audience for sure.
Oh yeah, he played it up for sure. It's going to be a fun ride. I think that's it. We miss anything, Zach, Marissa? Marissa's
The
with the
Eagles
overall mood
just
in the
selected.
chat.
Oh, the overall mood is like, okay.
Right.
Like, trust me, it's been worse. But the Eagles just selected Nolan Smith, so he will.
Oh, wow, of course. So they have every Georgia player.
Yeah, he will be off the board for day 2.
That's crazy. Wow, what a pick.
Yeah, at 30. We got 1 pick left.
Man.
So
they're going to get raved for picking the Ed Rusher there, because whereas the Jets would have, if they picked Nolan Smith there, nobody would have batted an eye probably.
Right.
It would have been like, oh, there you go. There's Joe Douglas. Yeah. But
yeah.
They took a different one. Hey, you know what?
Yeah, we shall see.
They trust their rankings, their scouting, and we will see. But it's certainly at this point, they've raised the eyebrows of the fan base heading into day 2. So the draft, we're just 1 round down. We got plenty to go. 4 picks, maybe more for the Jets. Feels like probably more before this thing's done. And we will continue to bring it. We're coming back tomorrow night, right?
Yeah.
That's what we talked about.
I'll be
We
here.
are.
All right. We'll see what they do. We'll see how many picks they make on day 2, and we'll have a full recap of the entire draft early next week. Thanks for staying up with us. Good numbers here, tuning in with us live. And if you catch us in the morning, thank you for listening there as well. We appreciate it. This has been the Can't Wait Podcast.